This is the wonderful JJ Ainsworth. She's going to be sharing her amazing research with you. She's been traveling with me widely. She keeps me on my toes when it comes to the research, pushes me quite far into like discovering things that I just don't see. She's got this ability to see things that others just don't. And it was because of her pushing me to go to southeast Turkey in December that we managed to witness that discovery of the winter solstice. So I wanted to go in January, but she was right, obviously. So anyway, please welcome JJ Ainsworth.
Hello, everybody. I'm JJ Ainsworth, like he said. I'm a writer, explorer, researcher, amongst other things. And my passion is all things ancient. And I really appreciate that you guys came to see us today. I'm going to talk about sites and symbols that I believe are heavily related to the goddesses that we've somewhat forgotten about, and how they may be involved in extremely old sites like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Çatalhöyük, along with many others. One of my favorite sites is the more than 10,000-year-old site of Göbekli Tepe, which I've been able to visit several times, along with you. This site is covered with amazing symbols that may relate to life, death, and rebirth, basically fertility. What I'm trying to do in this talk is to associate the symbols from Göbekli Tepe and other contemporary sites with the more recent goddess symbolism found across the world. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to go through and do my best. Another intriguing site which he was talking about, which I also went several times to, is Karahan Tepe. It's quite eerie and majestic at the same time, so I do urge you to go. It kind of changes your perspective on a lot of things. I'm going to compare similarities between these ancient artifacts and want to try to figure out maybe what was happening there. And I'm going to say the word goddess a lot, so. Shown here is the figure from A.B. Pitt at the 10,000-year-old site of Karahan Tepe, and a goddess from Çatalhöyük dating to about 8,000 to 9,500 years old. And I think that this anthropomorphic serpentine head in Pit A.B. is female, possibly portraying a goddess. I think it's female because when I have compared it to other figurines from sites, such as Çatalhöyük, the figure has the same distinctive style, but not just this one, there are several. The goddess has remained important throughout time from the Paleolithic until around 3500 BC or so, when patriarchy began to come into fashion. Çatalhöyük placed extreme importance on the goddess and her associated symbols, such as the bull, the vulture, the feline, and the boar, among others. These fertility symbols relating to life, death, and rebirth were essential to the builders of Göbekli Tepe and to the builders of Karahan Tepe as well. I want to also mention that Çatalhöyük has some really beautiful and full-bodied figurines that depict goddesses. So I'm going to be jumping around to different sites across the world that I think may be related to the Anatolian ones, influenced by them, because they share so many attributes. So on the topic of full-bodied figures, we find these voluptuous goddesses in the earth everywhere. In England, in Europe, in Malta, Turkey, and very specifically at Çatalhöyük. The Çatalhöyük artifact was buried in the earth, and it is this one here. Along with the one from Grimes Grave in England and the House Saflian and Hypogeum in Malta. So amazingly, we also have these same goddess types at Göbekli Tepe, which is here. And so this is extremely old, and we just have to wonder how this was able to stay so long, and I have no doubt that these were the sites, these old sites, that influenced that. So the Göbekli Tepe figure here appears to be holding a skull, but it's not, because she's a murderous old hag, which is sometimes associated with any feminine site. But it's showing her in the form of the death goddess, taking part in the excarnation ritual at the site. And this ritual is another reason we see vultures carved on Pillar 43 there. The goddess of death took part in rebirth as well, in the form of regeneration. So in ancient times, the goddess of death was not feared, but was a natural part of the life cycle of every single living thing on the planet. Without death, there could not be rebirth. Without excarnation, there was no reincarnation. All of this gives evidence for the ancients believing the earth itself to be a fertile goddess of life, death, and rebirth, which is what goddess temples were all about. So these images depict vestiges of the ancient mother goddess, one from Mesopotamia and the other two on the right from Malta. These cultures are 5,000 years old or more. The Maltese sites are known for their bulky, fertile, and curvy goddesses whom they revered so much. So much so that they even designed their megalithic temples to mimic the shape of her, as you can see when you compare the left and right images to the middle image here. Around 8,000 years ago in Yugoslavia, the Starčevo culture created this temple model made of clay, portraying the goddess as being the temple herself. She has inverted T-shaped entrances on all sides, and these T-shapes are important as it does show that the ancient and mysterious T symbolism we find around the world does relate to gateways, portals, and doorways. These goddess temple models are not a rarity. There's quite a few of them that have been discovered in the same region. So please note that the largest temple portrayed there has a T-shaped head and has egg or seed-like openings because it's related to fertility. This goddess is shown with her eyes and mouth wide open for placement of bread dough. So the identification of the bread oven with the goddess herself is shown in this small model as an oven. It comes from the Vinca culture in central Yugoslavia, and it's about 7,000 years old. So again, it is the goddess herself as these special temples and areas. So as I was talking about the T-shapes, I'm going to say a little bit more here. So here are examples of T-shapes representing temples from basically everywhere you look in the world if you pay close attention. Turkey, Peru, China, Israel, Egypt, and just everywhere. So many so that I can't really put them all up here. But again, these are just a few examples. These ones are really curious as they all have the circle or dot attached to them. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm pretty sure it is significant. So it's just really, really interesting and intriguing that that's there. So here we see ancient goddesses from the Indus Valley with the head shape of T. So this effectively solidifies the goddess association with the T, but this is not the only reason I say that. The female form was a portal or gateway as new life enters through her, birth. Basically, I believe that in ancient times, the T-shape would be mainly depicting females. So I want to look more closely at the middle image from the last slide. On the left and right sides of the large object here, we have two scorpions. And in the middle, we have the T-shape, while below we have a headless body, sometimes also referred to as a frog figure. Why would that be? We probably have to go further back in time to understand this. But in case you guys can't see it that well, here's the T-shape, headless body, and the two scorpions on the side. So maybe the Göbekli Tepe vulture stone from enclosure D can help us figure this out. In the lower portion of the Göbekli pillar, there is a scorpion, which is also on the Indus plaque, and that is really interesting. Also, there is a headless body on both artifacts. again here, and then over here. As well as the scorpion. And there is a T-shape on the plaques too, and the Göbekli Tepe pillar itself forms the T-shape, making the Indus Valley a possible descendant artifact from Göbekli Tepe, influenced even though the time difference is so large. So if you look on the bottom corner of the pillar here, you will see a headless body, and above in the middle of the stone, you'll see a vulture. And at Göbekli's descendant site of Çatalhöyük, you'll see the same imagery of the vulture actually participating in the ritual, which needs to occur before rebirth can. These sky burials or excarnation rituals still occur in some parts of the world today. Do you remember that full-bodied figure that was found at Göbekli Tepe holding a skull in her hands? That helps us to kind of figure out what these sites were used for. I think they were multi-purpose. I don't think Göbekli Tepe had one particular thing, or at Karahan Tepe. I think that they had many multiple uses. So again, I'm going to be talking and comparing maybe descendant goddesses from Göbekli Tepe. So in the funerary sphere of ancient Egypt, the scorpion goddess Serket helps the Egyptian solar god in his daily rebirth. She is a protector of the dead and also involved in healing. So she is a possible descendant aspect of the goddess from the Tepe sites, participating in the life cycle via death and regeneration or rebirth. These goddesses, though partitioned from the original mother, kept the exact same meaning throughout time because the goddess was very powerful. The scorpion is part of death and regeneration and has been used to represent this in many places across the world. And as we saw at Göbekli Tepe, the stamp still here with scorpions on the left and right is dated to 3300 BC, and it's from Mesopotamia. And it's the symbol of the goddess Inanna. The other figure comes from the ancient giraffe culture of Iran, dating about 3000 BC, and it is a female figure. And as I said, I think that Göbekli Tepe was a site related to the goddess and was used for many different things, including rituals relating to life, death, and rebirth. The symbols carved on the stones tell us the story of regeneration. So looking closely at enclosure H on Pillar 57 at Göbekli Tepe, there is another example of the goddess as the temple. We see two serpents holding what may be a decapitated skull forming a necklace, which I think may have been suggested by Andrew, but I'm not exactly sure. And below this is what I say is a vulva symbol, the pubic triangle. The decapitated skull representing death and the vulva representing life and rebirth point to it as female. So let's compare the Göbekli Tepe vulva to the very obvious vulva from the Lipinski Vir culture located in Serbia. So the latest data suggests that the chronology of Lipinski Vir spans between 9500 and 6000 BC, so it's really old. The site is situated on the banks of the Danube River. Lipinski Vir buildings have a layout which is based on elaborate geometry of an equilateral triangle grid and 60-degree circle sections in the form of the female genitals. These temples were the goddess herself. A sort of cult of the head or skull was also practiced at the site, like may have been done at Göbekli Tepe. Ritual burials included a strange practice of removing the skull from the head, then the mandible from the skull before they were all buried separately. Skulls were placed in special stone structures, and the skull would be placed on a larger stone slab, then protected by other crushed stones. The close-up images of the vulva depictions are really similar from the Pillar 57 at Göbekli Tepe. And I really do think that this pillar is depicting a female form. Okay, this stone is located in West Yorkshire, England, and it has been deliberately chosen for its resemblance to a human figure and then worked in order to portray the goddess. At the top of the figure, you can clearly see the wide open mouth and eyes. So, in case, looking at that area. The small scoop areas are cup marks. We see these style of markings all over the world. The cup marks can be found singularly or in large groups, which is most often the case. Frequently, they are enclosed within single, double, or multiple circles. And I'm going to quote Maria Gimbutas here about why the cup marks are encircled in such a way. She states that they are clearly metaphor, eyes that are simultaneously the source of divine liquid, the water of life itself, and its receptacle when it falls. She goes on to say, their meaning is suggested by the fact that such cup marks to this day retain some of their symbolic significance in the European subculture, which attributes healing powers to the rainwater which collects in them. Paralytics and those with other disabilities seek relief by drinking the holy water, washing in it, or rubbing it on the afflicted parts. So basically, a cup mark is a miniature well. Okay. Holy wells under large stones are sacrosanct and considered to be mysterious sources of the goddess's life-giving moisture, a belief found in all Europe, even up to the 20th century. So, as Hugh had mentioned, at Göbekli Tepe, on top of the two pillars, we see cup marks. This is important because we can kind of now begin to understand a bit more about the temple. Not only was it a place for rituals relating to life, death, and rebirth, but was a place of healing as well. There are not only cup marks on the top of the T-pillars, but around the actual site itself. This is a photo I took at Karahan Tepe, and as you can see, it also has the cup marks, adding a bit more evidence that the site was also a healing place. And this also leads me to think that the head in the AB pit was female, because we generally see cup marks on feminine artifacts or near them, as was shown in the previous slides. The cup marks here at Karahan, hopefully you can see, are very large, and this makes sense if they were used to collect water for the purpose of ritual healing or other things. And actually you can see that the water collected there on the day we visited. And some of the cup marks at Göbekli Tepe are just as large as this. I also want to mention this artifact which was discovered at Göbekli Tepe. It clearly shows a woman with a serpentine or mushroom-shaped head giving birth, again pointing to the site being clearly related to the aspects, again, of birth, death, and rebirth. So this is an interesting vase. It's from the Lingyel culture, and it's about 7,000 years old. And next to it, the vase is the flattened out design on it. The symbols used are 4 dogs, which symbolize the promotion of energy or life force. Often the canines are shown with crescents or full moons. So, sculpted around the mouth of the vase are 4 human figures with T-shaped heads and V-shaped arms. These T-shaped stylized human figures are what Maria Gimbutas describes as life columns. And the lozenge shape associated with the T-headed figure makes it, a female symbol, in my opinion. And the lozenges here, and attached to that are double spirals. So it really does make sense that the stylized human T-pillars may represent the goddess herself as live columns. There are plenty of male figurines found at Göbekli Tepe, and they're quite excited. So I do think that this is a situation relating to that, but it was for other purposes too, I'm sure. So the symbols of the goddess are found around the world. They traveled a lot and they lasted a long time. So in Siberia, on portable stone balls, we find these feminine symbols. In fact, the egg stone at the ancient site of Newgrange in Ireland, which is a goddess temple, and has solar alignments, has the exact same pattern. If we look, so that's quite a fair distance, and it's really interesting. And also we find the same pattern on small ancient depictions of bread, which in the past was associated with the goddess because of an oven's likeness to a pregnant womb and rising bread. The loaf-shaped clay object is probably a model of sacred bread, which has been marked by snake coils and lozenges, and was probably an offering to the pregnant goddess. We find these small stone spheres, not these ones, but many like it, abundantly in ancient Scotland. And here are, all of these are from Scotland, and I have an extremely curious interest with these, but some might not agree what I think they are. So I think these small spheres were some type of token or idol to help the individual with healing, fertility, or other things. They could easily be carried with the individual. And images of, I'm going to point at this real quick for you. So up in Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, different sites, people would carry women, little balls like this, and sometimes they would have a woman's face on them, but it would always have these little bumps, so it looks pretty much just like that. So these hedgehogs were placed in graves up to the early 20th century and in antiquity. Spiny balls made of wood and painted red, created in this century and found deposited in graves and churches, were called uteri. The hedgehog uterus connection is very old and most likely older than the beginning of agriculture. This connection between the hedgehog and the uterus and the symbol of regeneration definitely goes to the Upper Paleolithic, at least. There are some cave depictions that look very similar to the hedgehogs. And many of the Scottish spheres have beautiful designs that are easily recognized as fertility symbols. Unfortunately, I don't have the slides I have here, don't really have it, except here it's got the spirals, but there are better examples. So I think this figure is interesting. It's a terracotta figurine from the Vinca culture dated to about 5000 BC and found in Bulgaria. It graphically demonstrates the connection between the female form and the crescents here, or divided egg. Also of note is the lozenge located within the rectangle on the abdomen of this artifact here, which is a female symbol. The other image is a drawing of a curbstone from the ancient site of Knowth in Ireland, showing the same type of imagery, which I find really, really exciting. So here, abundant fertility is symbolized by twin crescents, eggs or embryos on buttocks and thighs from the Cucutini culture. This one is from Moldova, and it's aged about 6,500 years. But yeah, you can see that, and here are the crescents. So I wanted to talk a bit about this as well. So the top image is from Çatalhöyük, and it's located on the east wall. And it has 6 mottled breasts, each containing lower jaws of wild boars. So these breasts. If we go back to Göbekli Tepe, we see that the boar is depicted there quite prominently because of its part in death and regeneration. And I also want to say that in the UK, such as at the female mound site of Pt. Pegler's tomb, dates to about 3500 BC, boar jaws were found buried at this site. There have even been Neanderthal burials among the dead as well that had the jawbones of boars. So this tradition it's been, it's lasted a very long time. And I'm researching that because I'm trying to expand and see how far back it actually goes. And so this artifact is obviously, the big one is from Göbekli Tepe, and it's showing the belt with the H and the crescents. And this H shape here comes from Malta, which I think is a descendant site of the goddess from the Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. I think that the H is a life column, and the crescents are the egg or embryo promoting fertility and abundance. And also, the actual temples at Göbekli Tepe are kind of in this egg shape, the individual enclosures. And lastly, here are a few more curbstones from the ancient site of Nath in Ireland depicting the crescents or egg and the life columns. So I think these might be related to that, which is particularly interesting. So, thank you guys.